Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Texas Startup Scene AMA with Kenley Clark. I am Jonathan Chavez, a venture associate with Capital Factory based here in scenic Dallas, Texas. Now, before we start, I think it would be important to hear a word or two from our CEO and founder of Capital Factory, Joshua Bayer.
Howdy, my name is Joshua Bayer, and I'm the founder and CEO of Capital Factory. Capital Factory is the center of gravity for entrepreneurs in Texas, the #1 state for startups in the US. Thousands of entrepreneurs, programmers, and designers gather day and night, in person and online, for meetups, classes, and co-working. With boots on the ground in Austin, Dallas, and Houston, we meet the best entrepreneurs in Texas and introduce them to their first investors, employees, mentors, and customers. Capital Factory has invested in more than 300 Texas startups over the past decade. Whether physically in person or virtually online, Capital Factory is buzzing with energy and activity every day. Start with all the geekiest events on meetup.com and sprinkle in out-of-town guests, book signings, hackathons, innovation conferences, and pitch events. We're talking about thousands of participants every month. Most of the events are free, open to the public, and streamed over the internet. Capital Factory is all about community. Everyone's here to meet other people who can help them on their journey or to help others find their way. We kick off every morning with a text-based Ask Me Anything session with a mentor or investor in our Slack channel. Anyone in our community can ask questions in real time, and everyone else can see the answers. These are some of the most active investors and the most successful entrepreneurs in Texas. Those same mentors and investors do regular office hours where they volunteer a few hours a month. It's easy for any of our community members to find people with specific interests or expertise and to book a 30-minute meeting with them. With hundreds of mentors and investors in the network, there are dozens of meetings happening every day. Our co-working space provides desks, offices, conference rooms, classrooms, a podcast room, a video conferencing booths, and more. But the most important spot is the kitchen, because that's where everybody comes together. That's the real reason everyone's here, to meet each other. And every day at Capital Factory is demo day. Maybe it's the local angel investor network or a venture capitalist from out of town. Maybe it's one of the Fortune 500 scouts looking for new tech or a state or federal government official. It's delegations from other countries, school kids, army generals, and celebrities. We've helped entrepreneurs get in front of Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google, and even President Obama. How do we know who to put in front of the president? Well, first, they go through an intensive interview and assessment process where they're vetted by our staff and our mentor network. We categorize them by industry and technology and score them based on traction and potential. Then, they have to work their way up to the top. On the way, they'll often meet with members of our Innovation Council of Fortune 500 scouts looking for startups with technology that can give the big companies a competitive advantage. They're hanging out in the kitchen of the co-working space and in our Slack channels online. They partner with startups to go after big government contracts with the Army Futures Command, Air Force Ventures, and the Texas Military Department. The money is flowing. In the past year, 30 startups in our community received more than $60 million in non-dilutive funding through government programs. Capital Factory is also the official Google Tech Hub for Texas. Google plugs us into a global network of other entrepreneurial communities and creates unique opportunities to help our startups attract investors, increase diversities, and access Google services. All of this activity creates exclusive deal flow and data for our investment fund. Our goal is to invest in the best deals in Texas, no matter who leads them. Over the past 10 years, we've secured $110 million in pro rata, super pro rata, and follow-on rights in more than 600 companies. We watch them all interact with our mentors, investors, Innovation Council, and each other, so we know which ones to invest in. Some of our most successful companies include Aceable, Coder, Data.World, Icon, Sensei, Storable, and WP Engine. Are you ready to quit your job and become an entrepreneur? Do you know someone who is? That's who I want to meet. And those are the kind of people who I can introduce you to. You can message me directly on Twitter at Joshua Bayer or email me at josh@quityourjob.com.
Awesome. Thank you for that overview, Josh. And as Josh mentioned, Capital Factory has a variety of resources to get you plugged into the startup ecosystem, whether you're just beginning or you're a little bit further along here in Texas. And we host this AMA monthly to provide information on all of those resources, as well as additional resources in and around the state. Now, before we get started, I want to let the audience know that we will be taking questions from the audience in about 20, 25 minutes. But don't feel the need to start loading the comment section with questions, closer till. Just do it as we go along, and we'll make sure to note them and put a list together so that when we do start the AMA portion, we'll have those questions loaded and ready. So as I mentioned earlier, we have the pleasure of hosting Kenley Clark today. Kenley Clark is passionate about helping new technology startups get early traction in the enterprise space. As a proven startup founder with 2 exits, Kenley's experience has given him an extensive network within venture capital, startup development organizations, other startups, and corporations. Additionally, Kenley has spent time working for some very large organizations, including the Navy, where he worked on nuclear power systems, and global consulting firm Accenture, where he focused on the oil and gas and energy space. For those of you in the audience that are looking to link up with mentors through Union VC, Kenley is also a rockstar mentor here at CF, where he's happy to advise startups on a number of topics ranging from problem and customer discovery, business development, energy, all things Houston, and selling early stage tech into the enterprise. So with that being said, I'd love to bring Kenley Clark up to the virtual stage.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, how's it going, Kenley? Long time no see. I think it's been a whole 24 hours since we spoke.
Yeah. Josh got me super excited. I'm ready to quit my job and start a
Yeah, very inspirational. I can't say that though. I'm at Capital Factory. So Kenley, it's great to have you. We're really excited for today. And bios are great and all, but I'd love to start by maybe having you speak a little bit more about your background and possibly highlight some of the more meaningful experiences that you've had that have guided you to where you are today.
Sure, yeah. Interesting background. So a little bit different from a lot of people out there. I did not go to college right away. I joined the Navy a week after I graduated from high school, right? I was ready to kind of get out and see the world and go do something different. So joined the Navy, went through the Navy's nuclear power program, which is kind of how I got interested in energy to begin with. Went from that, got out of the Navy, went back to school, undergrad degree, all that kind of normal stuff, but then went to business school. Got to business school, had no clue what I was going to do. I was like, I don't even know what business school is, but I'll go because that's what everybody else was doing, right? So went to business school, graduated, went to work at Accenture, and this was kind of my first real intro into, well, 2 things. One, the oil and gas industry, and 2, the professional kind of business world. And so that was like a big turning point for me. It was like, all right, now I've got a real understanding kind of how these big companies work and blah, blah, blah. And it was really cool. I got to go out and do a lot of interesting things that I never would have thought I would gotten to do. It was different than what I thought. I thought coming from business school, oh, you're going to go wear a suit and tie and be in a boardroom and blah, blah, blah. It was the exact opposite. It was out in the field, working with people, doing some digital stuff, some very early digital transformation stuff. This was, 15 years ago. But I think that was where the light went off in my head. Was like, all right, I'm not really a big business person, but I do like working with these big companies, and I like bringing these new digital tools into those companies, especially into somewhere like oil and gas or other heavy industrial companies that they need a lot of help in that space. So I think that was one of the first big light bulbs. Was like, aha, yeah, let's go do that. And 3 or 4 years later, started my first company. That was 2011, so almost 10 years ago. 2011, started first company, had no clue what I was doing. I think Capital Factory may have started just like the year before, but here in Houston, there was nothing like Capital Factory. We were kind of on our own. There was one guy, Mark Nathan, like you and I talked about yesterday, and people said, "Oh, you want to start a startup? Go talk to Mark." And that was how I got started.
Awesome. Yeah, something you hit upon that I think is especially important, but that idea of starting a company after having either experienced significant pain points in previous contexts or previous space or industry, or at the very least knowing how to navigate that, which I imagine had to have powered how you approach sales, go to market, et cetera. So that being said, I'd love to hear a little bit more about some of the more significant challenges you faced in your early days as an entrepreneur.
Where to start?
Yeah, besides all of them, right?
Yeah, right. I tell people I like to mentor other startups and other entrepreneurs because I want to help them not make the same mistakes that I did, right? And because I made all those mistakes. I'd say one of the biggest one of the biggest mistakes that I made in my first company is not doing enough customer discovery work on the front end. I think like a lot of people out there, I wanted to jump in and start building something and get it to market without really kind of slowing down, taking a step back and saying, is this really the thing that the market needs? Is this the real problem? Is this the real pain point? Is this the real solution that this industry wants, or this target market wants? And so I think that was a mistake number one. And at the time, I didn't know it was a mistake. I know it's a mistake now. And so with my second company, we made sure that we really did a lot of customer discovery. Big focus on that. If people aren't familiar with that term, go Google customer discovery, Steve Blank, Eric Ries. This is all part of that lean startup mindset where you become the scientist. You become a researcher, and you take off your founder's hat and you put on your very objective, unbiased scientist hat, and you say, okay, I'm going to go out there and prove with real experiments and real data, is this a problem that needs to be solved? Forget about my solution. Forget about what it is I think the market wants. Let's put on this different hat and go figure that out.
So looking back, you mentioned earlier that when you started your first company, there were very little in the way of structured, readily available resources in your market, i.e., Houston, to help you. What are some resources that you think would have been just incredible to have at that point? That's Capital Factory, of course.
I mean, the whole idea of Capital Factory, like Josh was talking about, the going to the kitchen, and running into maybe it's fellow entrepreneurs that are in the same situation, or maybe they're 6 months ahead of you, and they've gone through what you're getting ready to go through. Having a place to go and talk to other entrepreneurs that like I said, are just a little bit ahead of you, and being able to get some feedback from them or being able to get some help from them, I think that would have been huge. And that was, again, that's something we still have a hard time with that here in Houston. It's gotten better, but we still have a hard time with that because, again, you want to go somewhere where there's kind of high density of people like you in a similar situation that are working on the same things and having some of the same problems. But yeah, I think that would have been a huge benefit.
Yeah, I imagine there may be some parallels here to your experience in the military and, kind of being a fresh recruit and, maybe initially leaning on, the experience and guidance of, more experienced team members.
Absolutely. And you're not looking at, the CEO of a Fortune 500. That's not your mentor, right? Your mentor needs to be somebody who's been where you are recently, right? Somebody who's been in that position in the past year. Because they're going to have good, fresh data, good actionable data, or good actionable things that you can go and do today. It might be good to have that mentor. If I were in the military and I think, oh, one of these days, 20 years from now, I want to be captain of a ship. That's cool, but I need people to help me get to the next step first.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Totally understand. So it seems like these days there's more and more attention shifting out of traditional tech ecosystems and kind of pouring into secondary, even tertiary markets. Obviously, Texas is a huge beneficiary of that with, if we're being perfectly honest, Austin standing out. So, my question here is, what advice would you give to Texas-based startups that, aren't necessarily based in Austin that want to take advantage of this wave of attention, of this opportunity, but still stay within their respective cities?
Yeah, and I know you and I talked about this yesterday. 5, 6, 7 years ago, here in Houston, we would load up in our car and we'd make the 3-hour drive to Austin to go to Capital Factory, to go to events at Capital Factory, because we didn't have that stuff here in Houston. Obviously, not everybody can do that, and you can't do that every day. That's a once a quarter or once a year thing. But now, of course, we've got all the virtual tools, whether it's this, the Slack channels. I'm a big fan of the Capital Factory Slack channels. I'm on them almost every day. Meet new people on them almost weekly. Union is helpful, obviously, as a mentor or as a mentee, trying to go through and see who's on the list and who you can reach out to. Even as a mentor, I go to some of the other mentors and set up meetings through Union to help me on things. So yeah, I think Slack channels, events like this, and then the mentorship. So when I do mentoring, it's almost always virtual. It's almost always on Zoom. So it doesn't matter where you are. I've mentored people from Capital Factory in Mexico and Colombia, in all over the United States, all over Texas. So
yeah, that's very true. I've definitely noticed, and not just with our organization, but certainly others, that since we've all effectively shifted to the cloud, there's been almost a democratization of resources, right?
yep.
Where startups in Dallas or Houston or Austin can utilize the resources or mentors or connections of people in other cities or even other states.
Yep.
So when it comes to the resources that are available for a startup to tap into, obviously, at least one would think that stage matters, right? What a startup or founder in the ideation stage needs is different than one that's in the pre-seed stage,
Yes.
or the Series A, et cetera. So, maybe we can tie this a little bit, more concretely to Houston. If I'm a startup in the ideation phase, maybe I haven't really engaged with the ecosystem or the community yet, but I have an idea that at least I think is cool. Where should I start?
Excuse me. I see events, and I've gone to these myself. Here in Houston specifically, the Ion has some events that are basically like, so you want to start a startup, right? And it's a good 1 hour kind of introduction. And I think at one time they had a kind of a course. It was like one a month, right? So you want to start a startup, and here's kind of the 4 things you want to think about before you ever put code to paper, right? Before you ever start building anything, here are the things you need to be working on. I think those are helpful. There's so many great blogs and books out there. Follow Josh on Twitter. He's got a great following on Twitter, and he's always sharing out good information. But there's just so much great information. Now it can be a little overwhelming, so you need to, like you said, you need to make sure you're looking at things that are specific to your stage. I think the mentors at Capital Factory, if you look, you can tell, I think, the ones that should be a little bit better for your stage. And I think the mentor coordinators, so like Rachel, can help you with that, right? They can tell you, hey, look, you need to talk to somebody like Kenley because he's good at helping people think through, what's their value proposition, who's their target market, what's their potential go-to-market, or some of those very early things. Where there's other people who are going to be much better at saying, oh, I can help you build your your 50-person development team, or I can help you with your UI UX, or I can help you with these other things. So yeah.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So we kind of touched upon this a little bit, but I kind of have to ask the question, just deadpan. Fundraising, does location still matter?
It's a good question. I haven't done any fundraising in about 2 years. And 2 years ago, it felt like things were starting to change. I will say in our industry, so in the heavy industry space, in oil and gas or utilities or manufacturing supply chain, that space has always been kind of left behind when it comes to financing. So it wasn't so much about location. I think it was really about our industry. The past 2 years, 18 months though, I think that's changed a lot. I see a lot more VCs who are focused on those areas. They seem to be fairly spread out. So they're in Chicago, they're in Chattanooga, they're in Oklahoma, they're in the Bay Area, they're here in Houston, they're in Austin. So it seems like they're a bit more spread out. Is that a good answer?
Yeah, I think it's a realistic one.
Yeah.
And frankly, as the entire world again has kind of shifted to the cloud, I think it's certainly impacted the processes of a lot of VC firms, right?
Oh, yeah.
About sourcing and really forced them in a situation. It's like, well, we can't really meet in person anymore, so this will have to do.
Yep.
But if this has to do, then that really expands the universe of companies we can engage with, whether or not we have the bandwidth for it. The possibility is there. So
Yep.
I think it's becoming a little less relevant. It's just going to be a bit of a transition. So kind of shifting gears a little bit, I think there's a topic that we kind of talked about yesterday. I think would be incredibly helpful for a lot of founders out there that are trying to build relationships and trying to get advice and trying to lockdown mentors in a world where it's very possible they might not meet them in person for quite some time. So, let's talk a little bit about etiquette when engaging with a mentor such as yourself. I'd like to start with, what are some classic mistakes you think founders have made when engaging with you personally, or just in general with a mentor virtually?
Yeah, some of the mistakes. You don't have to sell me, right? I'm probably not your customer, so don't try to give me your sales pitch. Before you ask a mentor for money, make sure that that's a mentor that's an investor. Some mentors are, some aren't. I am not an active angel investor. Some are, though. Actually, there's probably more who are than aren't. Um, those are probably some of the mistakes. One of the other mistakes I'd say is, we got 30 minutes. Let's try not to spend 15 minutes on background. Let's maybe have 2 or 3 minutes on background, or send me your background beforehand, because if I have the time, I like to go and look at your website, who you are, whatever it is. Send that to me beforehand. I'll have a look at it, and that way we can jump right into. And this is what I think. These are some good things you can do: is have a good agenda. And it doesn't have to be a lot. It could just be, look, I got three key things I want to cover today. 1, 2, and 3. Awesome. Let's start with 1, right? And let's work through those. So yeah, I think, like I said, come with an agenda. Don't spend too much time on the backstory. If you can, send that to me beforehand. And have good kind of specific questions, right? If I can't answer the question, I'm going to tell you. I'm going to be like, you need to ask someone else, right? And if I can't help, awesome. We'll talk about it.
Yeah, that's a really good point you bring up. Obviously context is always important, but when you do have limited time with a mentor, it's important to provide that context up front. I know for my own kind of office hours, I usually try to include a few questions before anyone signs up, like, hey, can you send your pitch deck over? What do you want to talk about? Be as specific and really concise as possible to make the most of those 30 minutes, right? So, kind of similar vein, we now live in a world where when you're meeting with someone who could be a mentor, it's not going to be over food or drinks. It's going to be, through this little screen here, or a big screen, depending on what kind of laptop you have. In your opinion, how do you effectively build rapport with a mentor, especially if you're, seeking something that extends past just the 30 minutes you have, via the union, and it may be something that could potentially eventually become a formal advisor to the company?
Sure.
It isn't uncommon here in Capital Factory, right?
Sure. Yep. Excuse me. Always start with doing my research. I'm going to go and look at that mentor's LinkedIn. I'm going to go look at their website. If they're an investor, if they're a VC, I'm going to go look at their portfolio, see who they've invested with or invested in, and see if I have any background with that company or know anybody at that company or whatever it might be. Right. I'm going to do my homework, do my research. So I think that's number 1. Number 2 probably is try to communicate, or try to work in the way that they seem to communicate in, right? Try to, I hate to say match their style, but I think that helps a little bit. And then I always end it with a, hey, I really appreciate it. That was awesome.
Yep.
What can I do? Is there anything I could do for you? Even if it is a mentor who, right, we're volunteering our time and we're happy to do it. We're happy to be here. We're not looking for anything in return, but I always say, is there anything I could do for you? An introduction, or, whatever it might be.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Kenley. I think, well, in my, maybe naive opinion, the best tech ecosystems are built on, a bedrock of goodwill and open communication, and just, kind of a general openness and willingness to help when and where it makes sense. We've learned here at Capital Factory that sometimes even one single introduction can change the entire trajectory of your company and the life of you, the founder, and your team, right?
Absolutely. And I just got off a meeting with some guys, and it was an introduction from someone that I knew to someone else, and the guy said, you know what, I'm not looking for anything back in this introduction. Introductions are easy. Introductions are cheap, right? If you guys go on and build something that's awesome together, that's all on you, right? Because the hard part here is the execution, right? Doing that early introduction, that's, like I said, that's not hard. So.
Awesome. And real quick before we start the AMA portion, to the audience, please, continue to load up the comment section with questions, and we'll read them out here shortly. All right, Kenley, I think we're getting close to the end of our part of the AMA, and of course, I saved the most important consequential question for last. As two guys that have both spent quite a bit of time in the South, I feel inclined to ask this: Carolina style barbecue or Texas?
So I'm originally from Georgia, and in Georgia we eat the Carolina style, or what I call Southeast style, which is a lot of pulled pork, a lot of baby back ribs. And I love pulled pork and I love baby back ribs. And I had never eaten brisket before I moved to Texas. Never, didn't even know what it was. And we moved to Texas about 13, 14 years ago. I think it's Texas style. Man, brisket is awesome. I love brisket.
I tend to agree with you. The only way or place we're all apart, I moved here from Tennessee. Memphis style dry rub still rules for me when it comes to to ribs. And I will die on that hill if I need to. All right. So that being said, let's go ahead and open it up to questions from the audience. I also have a few questions here that were sent in prior to that I'll probably dive into as well. Cool. So let's see. I think I see one from Liquidity Horizons. If we can pull that question up onto the screen. What resources / tools would you recommend for efficient customer discovery if we don't have a professional marketing person on staff?
So in my mind, and this again depends on the size of the company that you are. If you're an early stage company, if you're 4 or 5 co-founders, you are that marketing person, right? Mm-hmm. You are that salesperson. You are the person that needs to be out there doing the customer discovery, getting in front of your people, or getting in front of who you think your potential customers are, and learning. Excuse me. There is no better way to learn than to do it yourself. Are there efficient ways to do it other than kind of face-to-face? Yeah, there are, and that's where your creativity comes in hand. I almost always recommend the book The Right It by a guy named Alberto Savoy, I believe. He's an ex-Google engineer, and I think he's a professor at Stanford now. He's basically, his argument is make sure you're building the right it before you build it right. And he's got some tricks in there about doing some of this market research, using some of the prototypes is what he calls them. So it might be building a very dumbed down version of your product and using that to capture some of this market research. It might be just posting up your ads on Facebook and seeing how many clicks you're getting, whatever. But I always suggest check out that book, The Right It. He's got some cool stuff in there.
Awesome. Next question from Amran. Kenley's comment about the manufacturing seed financing landscape changing as of only recently hit home. What are the top 3 VCs he might recommend off the top of his head in the manufacturing space? And do they happen to be in Texas? I think is the second part of the question.
First one that comes to mind is here in Texas. That's Iron Spring. They're in Austin. Ty Finley. So that's the first one that comes to mind. The second one that comes to mind is actually in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and that's Dynamo. They're a little bit focused on supply chain, but they're very active in supply chain. There's a few that have just been announced, like some big ones that have just been announced, like some ex-partners from either Andreessen or one of the other big names who have rolled out. Is it 42nd North, 42 North, something like that? They were ex-GE corporate venture capital. They rolled out, they left GE, and then they bought GE's position in some of their investments as well. Those are the first ones that come off the top of my head. The other one, Brick and Mortar, they're actually in Silicon Valley, but they've got a Texas connection. The main partner is, I can't think of his name, but I think he's from Austin. The initial founding partner is Darren Bechtel. And if you know anything about Bechtel is one of the largest EPC firms in the United States. So he's got some of that support behind him. And then the other partner, like I said, he has a Texas connection. He comes back to Houston and Austin on occasion. I can't think of his name off the top of my head though, but Brick and Mortar is the name of the VC.
Yeah, one thing, one comment I wanted to make, based on Emran's follow-up question, i.e., do any of these happen to be based in Texas? It's not uncommon for funds that are, very thesis-driven and focus on specific industries to be based pretty much anywhere, but focus their efforts on sourcing companies from anywhere else. And largely that's a function of being so focused in an industry. If you're going to be geographically focused and invest only in supply chain, and you're based in San Antonio or something, that's significantly going to decrease the universe of companies that you can invest in. So I don't know if it necessarily matters if they happen to be in Texas. Obviously, it's convenient, but in this day and age, as we discussed earlier, being able to access them and communicate with them and engage with them would on paper seem maybe a little bit easier if they're willing to take a Zoom call or whatever. But anyways,
I'll add to that. A lot of times the fund may not be based here, but they may have a partner here. Mm-hmm. Right. So one of their partners might be here in Houston or might be in Austin, but the fund is based in Silicon Valley.
I actually have a follow-up question to that real quick. So do you think the reason why you're seeing kind of a mini explosion in funds that are investing in manufacturing, supply chain, basically hard problems, is that, I don't know, maybe the low-hanging fruit of enterprise SaaS has mainly been picked, or at least from this, the last decade, and now, some firms are starting to focus on kind of heavy industrial problems in industries that may or may not be regulated, more extensively than others.
I think that's part of it. I think the other big part is the size of the opportunity. Mm-hmm. I mean, people laugh at me when you say it, but we go, well, that's $1 trillion market. And they're like, what do you mean $1 trillion market? It's like, it is literally $1 trillion market. Now that may not be a startup's portion of the market, but yeah, so the opportunity I think is just big. And then, like you said, a lot of the other low hanging fruit in enterprise has probably been picked up, and people realize there's a difference, right? Building SaaS for small and medium sized businesses is one thing. Building SaaS or even other tools for large enterprises, the sales cycle and the gestation cycle over here is completely different. And so the know-how, the mindset, the network, all of that stuff is very different. The people who started Yammer and some of these other, SaaS tools for like small and medium-sized businesses, they're not the same people that are going to be over here building, supply chain tools for an ExxonMobil or whoever. So.
Makes sense. We have another question from Liquidity Horizons. If we can bring that up. What is your idea of a perfect initial meeting with a potential investor?
It's a conversation, right? You're both going back and forth. It's not just me pitching you. You're asking questions. We're having a conversation. You're really the investor is really getting into it. They're bringing up hard questions. Maybe you don't have all the answers, but they're thinking about things that you've thought about, and that those are important questions to answer. Maybe you've got an answer, maybe you don't, but that person really is clicking on the problem, the market, the customers, and all of those things. Because the last thing you want to do is meet with an investor who's like, yeah, this is great, blah, 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 blah. And maybe you take money from them, and turns out they didn't have a clue what they were talking about. They were money, right? So dumb money, if you will, but they weren't smart money. So I'd say an ideal meeting is with somebody who knows your market, is asking good questions, and is really, really showing an interest in what you're doing. And you can tell because they'll be into it, right? It won't be just them sitting back going, oh, well, what about this? No, you'll know. They'll be into it.
Awesome. I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions. Let's bring up, I think, Chandra. Yeah, there, perfect. I'm an undergrad student interested in entrepreneurship and innovation, but have no skills or experience to build a company. How do I get involved in the startup space? And what are the best takeaways?
I've been there myself. And I know exactly how you feel. I would say, and Jonathan might be able to have some good input into this, is go work for a startup development organization like Capital Factory or Station in Houston, which now is owned by Capital Factory, or the Ion or DEC, or I don't know who the other ones are nowadays, but go work at one of those. I had a meeting on Monday with a lady who she started off right out of undergrad. She was the receptionist at Station 4 years ago when they first opened. Now she's an account executive for one of the fastest growing startups here in Houston, Lion Guard, right? And just being in the community got her, one, she got to meet all the other startups. She got to meet all the other entrepreneurs. And that got her in the door at this company. And now she's been at that company for 2 or 3 years, and she's kind of worked her way up into that company. So I'd say go get involved, whether it's with the hackathons or a Capital Factory or whoever, even if it's just as an intern or as a volunteer for an event, right? Go get involved.
Yeah, and I'm not entirely sure where you're an undergrad at, Chandra, but getting involved with any resources or institutions or departments that are focused on entrepreneurship at your college, I think is definitely a great way to start. It's not uncommon for, especially in larger universities, but across the board, for there already to be pockets of entrepreneurs or student startups that are either working on interesting things or things that are spinning out of the engineering departments of your university or whatever. And that's a great way to get involved. And college is in general a great place to just kind of frictionlessly connect with others on a number of different topics, right? So that would be one of them. I think we have enough time for one last question. So in your opinion, Kenley, how do you see the Texas innovation ecosystem transforming or evolving over the next 20 years? Very broad question.
Yeah, right. Very broad. I mean, I think we're just getting started. I think we're going to see a huge growth in startups and innovation in Texas. Texas is a great place to do business. We got a lot of consumers here. We've got a lot of enterprise customers here. Yeah, I mean, I think we're just getting started. I think we'll see more of the resources that are needed to build those companies keep coming to Texas too. The people, the financing, the technology, and all that stuff.
The virtuous cycle, right?
Yeah.
I'm very excited for that. I always like to tell my friends from out of state, like, name one other state that has 4 out of the top, 11 cities by a number of metrics, all relatively close to each other.
Yep.
Seriously, I'll wait here.
Yep. I mean, I love Georgia and I love Colorado and lots of other places, but Texas is it.
Absolutely. Well, Kenley Clark, we really appreciated having you here today. I think this has been fantastic. I've learned something. I hope the rest of the audience has learned a lot.
Hope so.
Texas certainly has a lot to offer. There's many things we need to work on, but at the same in the same breath, I can say we're heading absolutely in the right direction. So with that being said, I think we can go ahead and wrap up. Thank you everyone for attending. Thank you for my team, especially Alex, helping me put all this together. And I'm really looking forward to the next Intro to Texas Startup Scene in AMA. Hopefully I'll be hosting. And maybe one of these days we'll have you back, Kenley.
Sure. Absolutely. Enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Take it easy, y'all.
Thanks.